All right. So, a little bit off topic for AMAI this morning, but we are going to be talking about a workflow diagramming language.
Okay.
Um, so, Justin, I'd like you to look up Drakon Hub and open it up, and then we'll talk about it.
All right. For the
It's
benefit of our, well, you'll see it. How do you spell Dracon?
Drakonhub.
All right. Dracon Hub. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's take a look at this. And let me share my screen. All right. Dracon Hub, your visual knowledge base.
All right. So Drakon Hub is actually an online way of building Drakon diagrams. But if you scroll down a little bit, you will start to see that Drakon is actually about changing flowcharts. And if we go to click learn more instead of reading here, you'll see that it's used at places like NASA. And obviously, the idea is a very structured flowchart. And one of the things that's kind of interesting is flowcharts. It sounds like they should be willy nilly, but willy nilly flowcharts suck to use.
Hard to read.
Hard
Hard to
to read.
understand, like, that this is like different, like, potential states off of one input. Yeah.
So, what I think is interesting is, and we can have a whole nother episode on the theory of constraints, but is the idea that they constrain what's allowed in Drakon Hub.
Mm. Mhm.
And so you can see the lines. Line intersections are forbidden. You can't have any line intersections. Only straight lines and right angles are allowed. And arrows are replaced with plain lines. And time in the diagram flows downward and it branches to the right. So the happy
Mhm.
path goes straight down on
Interesting.
that flow chart.
Yep.
And it's when you reach a non-happy outcome, for the lack of a better term, that it goes to the right and it continues to go to the right.
Mhm. Mhm.
And it is such a simple representation.
Mm.
I am shocked they don't teach this in normal, like even high school. Right? Like, it's
Yeah.
so important. And, of course, there's a lot of other links where there's a lot that goes into the actual language, like loops and everything else. Uh,
One thing I'm curious about is how long this has been a thing. Is it something that is going to be on Wikipedia?
the programming language, yeah, other uses.
Where? Oh,
Other
Dracon programming language. Uh,
1996.
96. So this has been around long enough to where you would expect that, yeah, this should be making its way into
Actually, wait, scroll up. Was that 19?
no, so
Sorry, scroll up. I think it said 1986.
86, actually. So,
I read it wrong.
and this was developed in Russia, part of the Soviet Union, part of the
um,
defunct Soviet Union.
Part of the space program of the Soviet Union, no less, right?
Interesting. Interesting. Here are all your iconography here. Pretty
By the way,
interesting.
12 and 13 for loops, right? Um,
Yep.
Beginning of a loop, end of a loop.
Yep. This is really interesting. It's really interesting, actually.
Guys,
I
like,
need
so much of what we do is complicated. Let's be real. Like, so much what we do in software ends up being super complicated, and we build these very loosey goosey wire diagrams and wire flows because it's still easier to understanding mountains and mountains of text.
Yep.
But this is so much more formal and formalized and rigorized than the workflows I'm used to, that it kind of blows
Yep.
my mind.
So here's something interesting is I have been doing a lot of work recently with an artifact called a Wireflow. And for those of you who don't know what a Wireflow is, it is one of my favorite things in the world to make. And I mean, it's one of my favorite things, one of my favorite artifacts to make. I like making sourdough bread more than wireflows, but but wireflows are basically like wireframes, sometimes really high level and abstract, sometimes more detailed, that are arranged together into a flowchart, right? Basically, so that you can see both flow and UI implementation together, because ultimately experiences online are not experienced statically, they're experienced as a thing that takes place over time, over multiple interactions over time. That's literally the definition of experience, right? Of how we experience something, at least online. So so what's interesting about this is that, and I'm going to bring it back to AI here for a second, because I've been thinking a lot about how can you take the information encoded in a wireframe or wireflow, sorry, which includes a lot of rich information from flow to states to conditionals to also the UI details that support that, which have to make their way into a backlog and be explained to developers in order to build that. If my wireflows followed the Drakon format and rule set, then I might be able to feed the Drakon rule set into AI as well as my Wireflow and say, write all the user stories for this. Because you should understand by the structure what the logic flow is. So you should be able to write the, oh, and if this happens, then show this screen and do this, da, 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 da. And I shouldn't have to actually type that out.
1 minute detour. Can you go ahead and go to overflow.io so we can show people what a Wireflow looks like? Because I know you can't show your stuff.
Right.
So these are Wireflows.
Yeah. Just like what a Wireflow looks like, basically.
And this is a tool that I use for a long time to create user and like end client over wireflows. Yes, you can use Figma directly, but the actual linking in here is far better than what Figma allows. And so
really cool.
Yeah. So anyway, overflows. If you click on examples, side note on the top menu, you'll find that it has some really, really neat ones if you wanted to just launch one.
Yeah, let's just launch this one here.
So this is an example of what, when he's talking about a Wireflow. What, and this is literally it. Now they have different view types, so you can click the prototype, like, and then this is part of what he's talking about on the top right, or the top menu. There's the prototype. No, in the middle. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I have Zoom Zoom was covering it.
And so now you have, this is the Wireflow, and you can click on it and you can see everything you can do on
and
a
it'll
page,
take you through
and
it.
it'll take you through it. And it'll so this is what you use Wireflows for. So anyway, sorry, I just wanted to like conceptually words suck. And so you're like, here's what a Wireflow is.
This is basically what a Wireflow is. Exactly. And so if you think about a Wireflow, so here's what's really, really interesting here. And maybe, yeah. So what I think is interesting, and I need to think about this more because I got to like think about Drakon in this context a little bit more. But if you set this up based on the Drakon rules, then essentially you don't have to annotate a lot of things because the information is encoded in the convention. This is kind of a very Rails-esque kind of way of thinking about things, right? Convention over configuration.
Yes.
And so, and so if you use convention like this, then you get to like take advantage of encoding more information into the document without having to add more actual visual artifacts to explain things, which makes it easier to understand, a lighter weight document, faster to create, and also imbued with more meaning. And something that a machine can look at and can intuitively understand because it has rules already built into it. Really interesting. I'm going to take some of my Wireflows this week probably and redo them in Drakon format to see what happens.
I mean, if you're going to do it for free, you can be working on the project that we're working on.
Yeah, fair. But then I have to create the wireframes. I already have like stacks of wireframes. I should have to relay them out.
But going back to the Drakon, right? Guys, I cannot tell you. So I have a consulting practice, right? And as part of my consulting practice, a big thing of what I try to tell people is spend your time drawing, because our pictures are worth 1,000 words, right? And then the part that I add as part of my practice is, and then do wireframes or wireflows, because a wireflow is worth 1,000 pictures. So a single wireflow like this is actually worth 1,000,000 words if you do the math, right? Like,
absolutely right.
And the reality is that doesn't sound right, but it is. It is so much easier to understand this in context. Than any other way. So it's really interesting that all of the different space programs look like they use Drakon. I don't know if you saw that. but it was
Yeah.
invented in Russia. Germany was using it. NASA uses it.
Yep.
And it's an actual programming language. Conceptually, though, we don't need it as a programming language. What you need it is to think about when you do a wire flow of some sort, or a flow chart of some sort. Just think about applying some of the rules. No
Yeah.
crossing lines. Happy path
Right.
goes straight up or down, or maybe straight left to right, depending on your use case. Bad outcomes go to the side or they go down, depending on your use case. Whatever makes sense for you. Just think about adding more structure to
Yeah.
your flow charts.
Yeah.
That
Because
blew me away. It's so obvious, and yet I've
so
never done.
obvious. It's so obvious, and it's just like a little bit of discipline that adds in a whole new layer of meaning, and that you get like kind of mostly for free, just by being a little bit more disciplined in how you lay it out. Really fascinating.
On that note, thank you for this non-AI AMAI. Have a good day.
See you guys. Good shit.
Yeah. Wait, I didn't pause recording. There you go.